This video is going to go through and work all the problems out from your test review that will help you to be successful on the test that you will take in Unit 2B on functions and graphing. For number 1, it asks you to graph y equals negative 3x minus 2, but it doesn't tell you how to graph it. So you have two options when it comes to one of these types of problems. You can do the quick and easiest way, which is to identify the m and the b and graph your points from there, or you can make a table if that works better for you. It is a personal preference at this point. So if you're going to use the m and the b, the m stands for slope, and your slope is negative 3. Remember, it's the number in front of the x. The b is the number behind the x or by itself, which would be the negative 2. So when you go to take and graph these, you're going to always begin at the b, and that y-intercept is always on the y-axis. So at negative 2, you would put your starting point, and then to get more points on the graph, you're going to have to do rise over run. Well, in order to do rise over run, you have to make your slope into a fraction, and the best way to do that is to put a 1 underneath it. If it's already a fraction, then you don't need to worry about it. Because it says negative 3 on top and positive 1 on the bottom, that means I'm going to go down 3 units and right 1 unit. And then I'm going to do it again, down 3 and right 1. Remember, if you run out of room, you can always go the reverse direction and it will still end up on a line. Okay, when you go ahead and get your dots the way you want them to be, you will connect with your straight edge all the way through and draw your arrows at the end. Okay, now if you prefer the table method, remember that the table has to have at least 3 numbers in it, and your rule usually goes in the middle, or you can just shorten it to make it the x column and the y column. So with the numbers that I want to pick, there is no fraction in here, so the easiest ones to pick are negative 1, 0, and positive 1. So if I plug in negative 1, then I'm doing order of operations with the rule. And the rule is negative 3x minus 2. So I'm going to be doing negative 3 times negative 1 minus 2, negative 3 times 0 minus 2, and negative 3 times 1 minus 2. Okay, so negative 3 times negative 1 is a positive 3. 3 minus 2 gives you a 1, so negative 1, 1. Negative 3 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 minus 2 more is negative 5. So from that table, now I can actually make and plot those and see what happens with the line. And I'm going to use the line that's already there, because negative 1, positive 1 is right here. 0, negative 2 is right here, and 1, negative 5 is right here. Notice that those same 3 dots were on the line that I drew by using the M and B method. So it gives you the same answer regardless of which method you use. You just have to graph correctly from your methods. For number 2, the question asks you to state the slope and y-intercept from the given table. Okay, well, the y-intercept is in the table because the y-intercept is the value where x equals 0. So the y-intercept is just the y value number. So negative 3 would be my y-intercept. Now, to get the slope from a table, you should know how to do this just like we do rate of change. And remember, rate of change, we find the difference in our y's and the difference in our x's. So negative 4 to negative 3 is adding 1. Negative 1 to 0 is adding 1. And we always do y over x. Change in y over change in x. So that's 1 over 1. Well, 1 divided by 1 gives me a slope of 1. So there's my answers to that one. For number 3, you're picking the equation that is written correctly for the situation. You have a $2 flat fee for shipping a package, and then you're going to pay an additional 80 cents per pound, right? And the W stands for the weight, and the P stands for the price of the whole package, right? So if I'm looking at it and I'm looking at my choices, I have to have 80 cents represented as 0.80. So the two that have 80 cents written correctly are C and D. A and B are out, just because they're not written the right way. So now we're down to 2 choices here. If we have a $2 flat fee, you have to pay that no matter what. What's changing is the weight. So the weight has to be attached to the 80 cents because that's what's changing every time it's a bigger pound. So we want to choose letter C as our answer because the W does need to be attached to the 80 cents. You're not changing the flat fee. The flat fee is non-negotiable. Okay, when we go up to number 4, you're going to find the slope and y-intercept from the graph. Remember that the y-intercept is always on the y-axis. So if you travel along the y-axis until you find a spot the line crosses, that's the number you want. So that's at positive 4. Now for the slope, you need to have 2 dots in order to do the slope. Okay, so pick any other dot that you have on the graph that would work. And for slope, you're using rise over run for a graph. So we're going to rise up and we're going to run left. So I'm rising up positive 2 and I'm running to the left, which is a negative 1. 2 divided by negative 1 gives me a slope of negative 2. You have to simplify your ratios. You cannot leave them as 2 over negative 1. Right, number 5 is a rate of change problem. On January 4th, the bank account was $1,230. By January 9th, her bank account was $1,015. Find the rate of change. So that's where you bring in your tables that you know how to make. The X value is the day, and the Y value is the money that's in the account. So on January 4th, day 4, she had, here, let me rewrite this in a different way. Put it on this side. So we had days and money. So on day 4, she had $1,230. On day 9, $1,015. All right, so we want to ask ourselves, how do I get from $1,230 to $1,015? And I'm subtracting $215. How do I get from 4 to 9? I'm adding 5. Remember, it's always y divided by x, so negative 215 divided by 5 will get us our answer. Negative 215 divided by 5 is going to give us negative 43, and it's dollars per day. So B would be the right answer. For number 6, you're identifying the independent and dependent variable. The independent variable is where you would put numbers into the problem, and the dependent variable is what it depends on. So if I'm looking at the price of a bill for a cell phone and then the number of minutes that are used each month, okay, the price of the bill depends on the number of minutes that it's being used. So the dependent variable is the price of the bill, which is represented by letter D. So DV is D. And then the independent variable would be the number of minutes being used, and that's represented by the letter T. So you have to be able to pick out the independent and dependent variables from a situation. For number 7, you want to name the domain from the following table. Domains are always the X values, so here are the domains, and when you write it, you don't just write down every number. You want to say D equals, and then it's a set of numbers, so this is where you have to use those braces. Do not repeat values. So the only numbers that show up in that domain are 1 and 2, and then they must be in braces. Okay, for number 8, which graph contains the order pairs listed in the table? It's just a matter of checking your table and checking the graphs and seeing which one works. So if I start with 2, 1, this is one order pair. That means I go right 2 and up 1. Okay, well, letter A does not have that dot. Okay, so we're throwing it out. If you go to letter B, right 2, up 1, there's no dot over there in the first quadrant, so B is out. Go to letter C, go right 2, up 1, again, no dot there. So by default, it's going to be letter D, but check out all the spots. Right 2 and up 1, there's the dot. Then you want 4, negative 3, 4 to the right, down 3, that's on the line. You want 1, 3, right 1, up 3, so that's on the line. And then 0, 5, up 5, that's on the line. For every dot, it has to be on the line before you can say that the answer is right. All right, so going to number 9, you want to figure out which term below can be used to describe her bank balance. Well, bank balance is this label over here for the y-axis. It has nothing to do with numbers. The label alone for the y-axis is the dependent variable. The x-axis label is the independent variable. Okay, for number 10, you have another rate of change problem, right? But you don't have any choices this time, right? So you need to make your table. We're dealing with years, and we're dealing with the number of countries. So in the year 2008, he had visited 15 countries. In the year 2015, he had visited 29 countries. So to get from 15 to 29, that's an increase of 14. From 2008 to 2015, that's an increase of 7. So it's y over x, 14 over 7, which means he visited 2 countries per year in that time frame. Right, for number 11, we want to pick out all the correct answers that show the dependent variable. Remember, dependent is synonyms with y value, synonym with output, and synonym with the y-axis. All right, so the y in the equation, yes, that's the dependent variable. You should be picking that one. The value of the car, which is this y-axis, that is dependent, so you should be picking that one. The time axis in a graph of time versus distance. Time is always x, so we don't want that one. The input column in the table, that's always x, so we don't want that one either. So the only two that fit the answer is the first two. For number 12, we want to figure out which table has a domain of 3 and 5 and a range of -1 and 2. So looking for a domain of 3 and 5, that means in the x column, all you see are 3s and 5s. Well, if I look at the first table, I see 3 and 5. If I look in the second table, I don't see any 3s and 5s, so I can cross that one out. If I go to the third table, no 3s and 5s for x. That's out. And if I go to the last table, I see a 3 and a 5, but I also see a -1 and a 2. That can't happen. Okay, and then double check that first table. The range has to be -1 and +2, and it is. So this is the table you want. Okay, for number 13, wants to know what is the range of this function. So looking at the dots, remember range are the y values. So the quickest way to do this is to look at the y-axis. So this bottom dot traces over to 0 on the y-axis. These two dots here in the middle are at +1 on the y-axis, and these two dots at the top are at +2 on the y-axis. We could ask the same question with the same dots and ask you for domains. So make sure you read the question carefully. If you can't follow the tracing it over to the y-axis, you can write the order pairs for every single dot. So this one would be 1, 2. This one would be 0, 1. This one would be -1, 0. This one would be -2, 1, and this one would be -2, 2. And then if you take all the y values, you can still see where our answers came from. So you have two options with that. One takes a little bit more work than the other does. Okay, for number 14, you're picking the table that matches the equation. So the first thing you want to do is start plugging in the x values and see if they make the y values. So if I plug in -8, 1/4 times -8 plus 6. Well, 1/4 times -8 is -2. -2 plus 6 is +4. So the first one worked. So then you go to the second one and you change that number and do the math again. So this time we want 1/4 times -4. Well, that's going to make a -1. -1 plus 6, that is a +5. That one works. Do not assume that the last one will work. Double check it before you mess things up. So if I put a +4 in here, 1/4 times 4 is a +1. 1 plus 6 is 7. It did not work. So if you had assumed that because the first two worked, then the third one would work, you would have gotten this question wrong. So A is not the answer. So now we want to check the next one. If I go to put in a -2, okay, we don't want to use -2 because 1/4 times -2, okay, is going to give us -1/2. Okay, but if we did use it and then we added 6, we would get 5.5. Right? But when we go to put in the +2, that would give us 1/2 plus 6, which is 6.5. So that would throw out this last one again. Okay, so be careful. Even though there's decimals in here and we don't operate with decimals, you still need to check out and see if the math would work. All right, so we know from the first table that -8,4 worked. We know that 0,6 works from the second table. Okay, so we want to take and see about the 8. So if I turn this into 1/4 times 8, that is 2. 2 plus 6 is 8, so that worked. So the table that had all three of them working is letter C. Right, when you go to number 15, you want to figure out which line matches the equation. Okay, the fastest way to get through this is the M and B, right, but you can certainly make a table if you so wish. I'm going to stick with just the M and the B. The M is a +4, and the 3 is a the B is +3. Because the slope is positive, you can rule out all the lines that go downhill. So B and C are already out. So then you want to take a look at your y-intercept. The y-intercept needs to be +3 on the y-axis. Letter A does not have +3 on the y-axis. Okay, it has something else. So there's that dot. That's not where it goes. But if you look at letter D, +3 on the y-axis, it does go through that. So that means letter D is the answer. So use your knowledge of slope and y-intercept to make your problems easier for yourself. For number 16, you want to take and pick all the choices that fit the equation. All right, so when we're looking at the M is always in front of the X, so that's 1/2. So that means A is that choice. When you look at the B values, the B is the number by itself. That's the -7, so that'd be letter D. And then in terms of what type of slope it has, because the slope is 1/2, that is a positive number. So all three of those choices have to be chosen. All right, number 17, you want to write the equation of the line if the slope is 6 and the y-intercept is -2. The letter for slope is m. The letter for y-intercept is b. When you have an m and a b, it goes into the equation y equals mx plus b. So your equation would be y equals 6x minus 2. There is no math to do that. It's putting the numbers in the proper place in the equations. All right, for number 18, you have a situation dealing with the hours worked and the money that is made, and you want to pick the graph that corresponds to the table. So for 1 hour, it's making $6, right? Well, in graph A, 1 hour has $3, so that's out. When you go to graph B, it has 1 hour at $6, so that's okay. When you go to C, it's 1 hour at $9, so C is out. And when you go to D, it's 1 hour at $12, so D is out. So letter B has all the right answers, 1, 6, 2 goes to 12, 3 to 18, and 4 to 24. All of those can be found on that graph. All right, for number 19, you want to find the range to the function if they give you the domains. Remember, domain are the x values. You can make a table or you can do 3 separate little problems, but you're trying to find the y values each time. So we want 5 minus 3 times -3. We want 5 minus 3 times 1. And we want 5 minus 3 times 4. In all 3 of these instances, you want to do order of operations, and multiplication has to happen first. All right, so the 5 stays there. This is -3 minus 3, or sorry, -3 times -3. That makes a positive 9. 5 plus 9 makes 14. Over here, 5 stays where it is. -3 times 1 is -3, so 5 minus 3 gives you a 2. Then in the back, -3 times 4, so 5 stays, gives you a -12. 5 minus 12 is -7. So now when you get your final answers, you want to put them in braces. So 14, comma, 2, comma, -7, close your braces, and there's your 3 ranges. Okay, but you had to use the domains that were given. Okay, for number 20, you want to find the domain and range from a set of ordered pairs. Remember, it is a set, so your answers do need to be in braces. Domain refers to the x values, range refers to the y values. Okay, so the domains would be 2, 1, and 0. You cannot put that last one because you cannot repeat numbers. The range is going to be 3, 5, 4, and -3 because all those numbers were different. Okay, for number 21, you want to determine which ones of the following pictures and things are not functions. So there's different ways to tell if you have a function or not. Okay, from a table, you're looking at the x values. If the x values are all different, it is a function. So this table is a function, so we don't want to pick that. Okay, when you look at mapping or the ovals, picture with the ovals, you want to see if any number has more than one arrow coming from it. If you see the 5 right here has 2 arrows that are coming out from it, which means that 5 has been used twice. You cannot use the same x value twice. So that means that one is not a function. So you want to pick that one. When you go to your order pairs, again, you're looking at the x values to see if anybody's been used twice. Nobody has, so that is a function. We don't want to pick that. Okay, when you're looking at graphs, you're using the vertical line test, and you're trying to see if you draw a vertical line, will it hit more than one time? This does hit. It hits at the top and the bottom, so that hits twice. Because it hits twice, it's said to have failed the vertical line test. When it fails the vertical line test, that means it is not a function, so that is one of your answer choices. When you go to draw a vertical line through the next graph, it will only hit one time everywhere you draw a line, so that one is a function. And then when you look at the last picture, all the numbers in the X oval have one arrow going out from them. So that one arrow shows that nobody is repeating. So that one is a function. So the only 2 pictures that are not functions are the 2 that are chosen. All right, and then it's not the last question, but almost last question. For number 22, you want to take and name the domain from this graph. And notice the graph has a lot of dots on it, right? So we are potentially looking at a lot of answers here. Remember, domains are the x values, so we're using the x-axis, right? So each dot actually has a spot on the x-axis. And if it makes you feel better to do the order pairs, then do the order pairs. So from left to right, -5 has a dot. -4, I can go up and find a dot. -3 has a dot. -2 has a dot. -1 has a dot. 0 has a dot. 1 has a dot, 2 has a dot, 3 has a dot, and 4 has a dot. So every dot had a different x value, and all of them have to be listed. None of them repeated. Okay. All right, and then the last question is asking you to find slope of a line giving the following points. Right, so the best way to do this is actually to set up your ordered pairs into a table. So if you write them stacked up, I'll show you how easy this is to make the table. Set them up and stack them up, and where your commas are, that's where your line's going to be drawn to separate the x's and the y's. And then you set up your labels, x on the left, y on the right. And then you're going to just follow the rate of change. How do you get from -2 to +6? You add 8. How do you get from 6 to -10? You subtract 16. Remember that it's always y over x. So that would be +8 over -16. You always want to reduce your fractions, so that makes 1 over -2. And that is your m value. Okay, so even though we give you 2 ordered pairs, you can still use your knowledge of tables and rate of change to help you get the answers right. Okay, so use these questions to help you study and prepare for the test.